No.
That's the short version of the Opium Wars, and it all started with a cup of tea. Why don't Americans drink tea? Not because they don't like it, not because it doesn't taste good, but because 250 years ago, drinking tea in America was considered unpatriotic. To understand why, we have to go back 2,100 years before that, to the country with 1 billion people. In 141 BC, Emperor Jing of Han died and was buried with weapons, chariots, ceramics, and tea. High-quality tea made from young, unopened buds. In 2016, scientists analyzed the chemical remains in the tomb and confirmed, this is the oldest physical evidence of tea in human history. Guinness World Records certified it. At that point, ordinary Chinese people barely knew tea existed. It would take another 800 years before tea became something everyone drank. And during all that time, China kept every secret locked down. How to grow it, how to process it, how to brew it. The rest of the world only knew one thing. If you want tea, you pay China. The most perfect monopoly in the history of global trade. Until the British got addicted and got tired of paying. Meme: British stick figure walks up to Chinese stick figure hugging a tea plant. Hey, I want your tea. Not selling. Bang. Britain shoots China, grabs the tea plant. Mine now. Britain looks at the tea plant, nods approvingly. I'm going to call this free trade. Tea first arrived in Europe in the 17th century. Initially sold in the Netherlands and Portugal as a rare medicine, extremely expensive, only the nobility could afford it. Then the British tried it, and everything changed. Within a few decades, tea went from a luxury item for the elite to something the entire country couldn't function without. From the royal family to factory workers, from parliament to the local pub. The British drank tea in the morning, at noon, in the afternoon, and any time they had an excuse to sit down. By 1750, Britain was importing over 2 million pounds of tea every year from China. The problem was China wouldn't buy anything from Britain, not because they didn't know about British goods, but because they didn't need any of it. Emperor Qianlong once wrote directly to King George III, "We possess all things. We have no use for your country's manufactures." Polite, concise, completely accurate. So British silver kept flowing one way to China, in exchange for tea. Nothing flowed back. The trade deficit kept growing. Britain kept getting more anxious. They needed to find something China would actually buy. They found it. Opium. The British East India Company grew opium in India, cheap, abundant, and most importantly, addictive. They smuggled it into China through middlemen, selling it to ordinary people at low prices. The plan was simple. Chinese people buy opium with silver. Britain uses that silver to buy tea. A perfect loop. For Britain, it worked too well. By 1830, an estimated 2 million Chinese people were addicted to opium. By 1838, that number had climbed to 10 million. Entire villages collapsed. Government officials were addicted. Soldiers were addicted. The economy started to buckle. Emperor Daoguang looked at the situation and made a decision. This stops now. He sent Commissioner Lin Zexu, one of the most principled and hard-nosed officials in the entire imperial court, to Guangzhou to deal with the problem. Lin arrived, confiscated every last piece of British opium he could find, over 1,000 tons, and destroyed all of it. Then he wrote a letter to Queen Victoria. That letter is one of the most fascinating documents in history. He explained that China had provided Britain with tea, silk, and porcelain for centuries, and in return, Britain was poisoning the Chinese people with opium. He appealed to the Queen's conscience to put a stop to it. Nobody knows if Queen Victoria ever read that letter, but Britain's response was very clear. They sent the Navy. In 1839, the British Navy attacked China. The fight was completely one-sided from the start. British warships had modern cannons, well-trained crews, and technology that was generations ahead. China had more soldiers, but weapons that were centuries behind. China lost. The Treaty of Nanking in 1842 ended the First Opium War. The terms China had to open 5 ports to British trade, pay massive war reparations, and hand over Hong Kong. Hong Kong. A piece of land Britain took, simply because China dared to confiscate their opium. But it wasn't over. In 1856, the Second Opium War broke out. This time France joined Britain. China lost again. More ports forced open, more rights stripped away, and opium was officially legalized in China. In other words, China was forced to legally accept foreigners selling drugs to its own people. Out in the open. On the books. In Hong Kong, that piece of land, China didn't get back until 1997, 155 years later, all because Britain didn't want to keep paying silver for tea. While the Opium Wars were playing out, Britain was running a completely separate operation. This time not with guns, but with one man, a costume, and an extraordinary amount of nerve. His name was Robert Fortune, a Scottish botanist. His mission: infiltrate China's secret tea-growing regions, learn how tea was grown and processed, and bring those secrets back to the British East India Company. The problem? Foreigners were banned from entering China's interior provinces. Fortune's solution? Shave his head, put on Chinese clothes, wear a fake queue, that long braided pigtail, and walk straight in. He didn't speak Mandarin, but he had enough confidence to pass through checkpoints, enter tea plantations, and learn directly from Chinese tea growers. People who had no idea they were teaching their craft to the man who was about to end their country's monopoly forever. Fortune brought back tens of thousands of tea seedlings and the full processing knowledge to India. The Darjeeling and Assam tea industries were born. Within a few decades, India overtook China as the world's largest tea exporter. China lost its tea monopoly. For good. And Americans? They had already moved on from tea long before any of this. Here's the part most people don't know in full. Before the Opium Wars, Americans actually drank tea. A lot of it. Tea was the most popular drink in the American colonies. Just like the British, they imported it from China through the East India Company. But Britain taxed it heavily and forced the colonies to buy tea exclusively through the East India Company at prices they set with no alternatives allowed. Americans were furious, not because they hated tea, but because they hated being controlled. On December 16, 1773, a group of American colonists disguised themselves as Mohawk Native Americans, boarded 3 East India Company ships docked in Boston Harbor, and dumped the entire cargo overboard. 342 chests, worth roughly $1 million in today's money. All of it into the harbor in 3 hours. After the Boston Tea Party, drinking tea became a political act. Independent supporters declared a total tea boycott. Drinking tea meant supporting Britain, which meant betraying the revolution. Women poured their tea down the drain. Coffee houses updated their menus. John Adams, one who would go on to become the second president of the United States, wrote to his wife declaring he would never drink tea again, even though he hated coffee. He drank coffee out of patriotism, not preference. And the whole country followed. Not because coffee tasted better, but because refusing tea was the simplest way to say, "We are not your colony anymore." That habit lasted. 250 years after the revolution, Americans still drink coffee every morning while the rest of the world drinks tea. It all traces back to 342 chests of tea thrown into the harbor on a cold December night in 1773. From an emperor buried with tea 2,100 years ago, to 2 wars, a botanist in a disguise, and 342 chests thrown into the ocean on a cold night. That's the journey of 1 cup of tea. Next time someone asks why Americans drink coffee instead of tea, now you know. If this video hit different, hit that like button. And subscribe if you want to keep exploring the insane history of ordinary things. See you next time.